What is the creepers mean?
We're going to go over that. Okay, so put the books away. I want you guys to pay attention to this because I'm going to explain a lot of what might have been confusing. Okay? So, Nate, hold on. You're fine. Okay, so we're going to do like a little introduction to Lord of the Flies. Wait, we're not working. Sweet. Okay, so the author is William Golding. You guys read the bio, right? So we know that he did 2 years as a science student at Oxford, switched his major to English, and then he joined the British Royal Navy in World War II. Okay, he was actually on the beach on D-Day. So can you imagine the stuff that he saw and more? Okay, do you think your faith in mankind might be a little bit like gone by the time that you're done with that war? Okay, so you kind of know his background. All right. So he became a teacher studying Greek classics. He quit to write full time. Remember when you guys read the bios? He tried to get the Lord of the Flies published 21 times. Okay. Why did he try? Or why wasn't it? I don't know why it wasn't published, but the publishers did not agree to publish his book for 21 different times. Okay. And now it's this literary classic that's taught like throughout the world. That's what it looks like with Me Beautiful Man. Okay. Historical influences. Alright, number one. Golding wrote Lord of the Flies in 1954, which means it was less than 10 years after World War II. Okay. Have you guys gotten into the Cold War at all? I think I asked that on Friday. Okay, so the Cold... Okay, yeah, you're pretty far away. So the Cold War was between like 1950s to 1990s, and it was kind of the war of the United States versus Russia. And there was never any physical battle, there was never any physical war, but it was a Cold War because it was a race to build nuclear weapons. It was a race to the moon, okay? So it was like this constant like battle and tension with Russia where we were both trying to like beat the other one out and develop weapons first and get to the moon first. So there was all this tension. It never actually boiled up to like a war, but it was, did you see why it's called a Cold War? Okay. So he was in the middle of that when he was writing. So obviously he saw the atrocities of the Holocaust. He was alive during the bombing of Japan and then the communist threat. Okay, so think of all those things and how they contributed to this epic just failure of mankind in this novel that we're going to get to. All right? Okay, historically, in times of widespread socioeconomic distress, the public feels vulnerable and turns to a leader who offers the most strength or protection. Okay? So you guys haven't gotten to World War II yet, and I'm not a history teacher, but I know something of it. Okay? You haven't talked about World War I at all. So after World War I, Germany was hit with like so many sanctions that people were starving. Okay, so do you know what a sanction is economically? Okay, so North Korea, you guys know what's happening in North Korea right now? Historically? Okay, North Korea is governed by a dictator, which means that basically he can do whatever he wants and he can make people do whatever they want. So I think I mentioned before that like people think that he scores a perfect golfing score every time he golfs. Okay, no one can have his haircut. His haircut is he's the only person that is allowed to have that haircut in the country. Okay, if he thinks that someone is a traitor against his country, that person and the entire rest of their family for the length of history will be tortured and imprisoned. Okay, that's what you're dealing with there. So the entire world has implied sanctions against North Korea. So they won't buy their oil. They won't buy their food. So they have no way of making money as a country. Okay. So now the entire population of North Korea is starving for. It's just terrible. Okay. So the same thing happened to Germany after World War I, to where they just couldn't. The country was completely poor. And so when a country is so devastated, they'll look for any sort of power. And guess who was right there waiting? Mr. Hitler. Okay? So then that's kind of where World War II got started, is people looked for some sort of leadership. So can you kind of guess what's going to happen in this book? They're going to look for some sort of leadership, right? Towards the islands. Okay? Golding's wartime experience showed him that brutality wasn't limited to the Nazis. Remember that quote I mentioned at the discussion board on Friday? Where he said something to the effect of, it's not just the Nazis, and anyone could be a Nazi. Okay, he's seen, I can't even imagine, wartime. I'm sure, Liz, your dad, has seen some crazy stuff, right? Mm-hmm. My husband's best friend is a veteran, and the stuff that he's told my husband of just things that he remembers, it's terrible. So I can't even imagine as an author the things that he saw to make him influenced to write this book. Okay, so you guys know about the atomic bomb that was dropped in Japan, right? Okay, so 2 atomic bombs were dropped in Japan, wiped out hundreds of thousands of people. For generations, people were born, or babies were born with birth defects because of the effects of the nuclear bomb. Okay, so like babies were born with less limbs, they were completely affected. Dwarfism, all these things contributed from the atomic bomb, the radiation that was left in Japan. So those futuristic movies where people are like, oh, I can't go in the radiation zone, and they're living on the outskirts of town, like in Godzilla and stuff like that. Okay, that's from a bomb. So in this movie, an atomic war causes the boys' evacuation. Okay, so in the book, let me see if I can find it. In chapter 1, the only hint that you guys have that it is an atomic bomb is once in chapter 1, and it mentions that they saw the bomb in the sky. Okay? So the reason these boys are on the plane is because there's an atomic war happening, and so all these British boys were just put on the plane to go to safety.
What?
Do you know what an atomic war is?
Well, no, yeah, I just didn't know that happened at all.
It's not real.
Well, no, I know that.
This is the setting of the book.
No, I know, but when I was reading it, I had no idea.
Yes, I know, that's why we're going over it. It can be difficult to understand the background, okay? So that's why these boys are on this island, is because they're evacuating an atomic war, a nuclear war. Alright? Okay, so check this out. Aiden, focus. So, remember how we talked about satire? Remember when we watched Undercover Boss? Yeah. Okay, satire is something that you make fun of in order to exploit how stupid it is, basically. Okay? So, remember when we watched Undercover Boss and it was Kylo Ren on the spaceship? It's making fun of the show Undercover Boss. Okay? So, in Michael, in this author's The Coral Island, A Tale of the Pacific Ocean, written in 1857, it's a book about a shipwrecked group of boys, which exemplified certain assumptions about English schoolboys and British culture, okay? So what this author did in his story was that it was basically a group of boys stranded on an island, and because they were British, they could keep things together and keep it civilized because they were British, okay? So it's kind of saying that, British people are, super fancy, basically. So, Golding knew this wasn't true, and so he's using children. He's kind of making fun of the fact that this author thinks that children are naturally virtuous and decent, okay? And the reason we know this is because they often refer to the island as the Coral Island. So he's making connections, okay? So is this book making fun of the fact that people think British children, either British children or more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not fancy, but proper, okay? Or is it making fun of the fact that people think children are naturally innocent? We'll see, okay? So the one theme that you'll kind of see, and remember, there are several themes. You guys, I'll pick up several things. He is tackling the topic that man is inherently evil, okay? And he's using that through children. It's so much more effective when you use it through children, because it's just kind of sad, right? You think little kids are innocent. In this case, he's not necessarily saying that. He's making you consider how evil mankind really is, okay? All right, so these are the literary terms that we already know. We know it's an allegory. Bill Dunk's Roman, it's a coming-of-age novel. So, anything you guys have read, Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Perks of Being a Wallflower, all of those books where it's kind of like a kid growing up, that's a Bill Dunk's Roman, okay? This is one of those stories. Okay, so in the opening of the book, it's set in the mid-20th century. So remember when he wrote the book, it was 1954? That's basically the time period, okay? However, in this story, a plane of schoolboys is evacuated from England during an atomic war. We just talked about that, okay? Then the plane breaks apart over an uninhabited coral island. Hey, coral island, okay, in the Pacific Ocean. So remember, I don't know if you guys remember in the chapter, it talks about how the plane split in half and the boys in the back of the plane were like swept out to sea, right? Okay, so that's where we are right now. The plane splits in half. Half the boys that survived on the plane land on this island, and they're like, okay, what do we do now? All right, so this is what the island looks like, okay? You have Castle Rock. We can't really get over that. I'm going to skip it. We'll get back to it later, okay, because there's lots of clues. Okay? 4 main characters, all right? We have Ralph, Piggy, Simon, and Jack. All would represent something other than what they appear to be on the surface. What's that called? Symbolism, and bigger picture is the allegory, right? So all these characters are symbols of something bigger, okay? So Ralph, Piggy, Simon, and Jack. We know this is Piggy, okay? Simon, Ralph, and Jack. If you haven't picked up already, who do you think the protagonists and the antagonists are? Just based off of those pictures. Jack. Okay. Yes, he's supposed to be.
Wait, who's the one with right?
That's Ralph.
Jack seems like he's gonna like try and take over everything. Biggie kind of looks like Steve.
Big kind of like what?
Harry Potter.
A little bit, right? We just need a scar. Okay? The creepers. Alright. So who came across the creepers and like had no clue what that meant? Okay. So the creepers are these like creepy tree branchy things. Okay, so imagine seeing these kind of in the night. And what it's supposed to represent, like, I think I told you guys like my story, like the boogeyman. Like when we were kids, my dad, we lived on like 10 acres, and we had to go like through we had blackberry patches on the side of the road. And at night, he would do this all the time on weekends. He would pull up right in between the blackberry patches and roll down the window, so the boogeyman's gonna get you. You're like, ah! Like screaming, freaking out. Okay, that's what this is supposed to kind of represent. It's supposed to kind of represent like the creepiness that like you fear in a child, like the unknown. That's the creepers. Okay, so the creepers is kind of like the what?
So they're branches.
They're branches, but they're symbolic of something bigger.
So they're not really. How do you know?
I'm telling you. I've read this book several times. Okay? You won't know that until the end of the book, but it's so difficult to read that we're going over it now, so you know as you go. Once you read the book, you can be like, okay, this, that, perfect. But to understand it, because it's a hard novel, we're going to go through it now. So the creepers are just supposed to be symbolic of something creepy, basically, right? To kind of like freak you out. Sets the tone of the novel, right? The environment. Alright, the conch. Okay?
That's what I
Right?
thought.
SpongeBob is in this book!
Okay.
Okay. Alright, so can someone tell me the first thing they notice about the conch, or the first scene of the conch? What is it used for? One of you? Raise your hands.
So it's like I feel like it's like kind of like the power, like the wealth, and like it's so important to everyone and everyone wants it, but then this guy has it, so they make him the leader.
Okay.
Wait, you make a what?
So the conch, okay?
Yeah.
Kiara was saying whoever has the conch kind of has the power. Okay, and how do they use the conch? When do they use the conch?
They Ralph blows on it to like call the kids in so
Okay.
they can regroup.
Mm-hmm. And whoever has the conch is the one who's able to speak, right? So there's some sort of order, right? There's order and there's respect. Where okay, the person who's speaking. So right now, what can we say about the society? Is it still civilized?
It's controlled.
Okay, it's controlled. So as we go, I want you guys to consider where the conch is and how it's used. Because right now it's kind of used as a way to keep order. Alright? So right now it's keeping order. But again, this novel is about how man is inherently evil. Okay? Naturally at the core, this author thinks mankind is evil. Okay? So follow along with this conch. Right now it represents civilization, represents order. What is it going to symbolize as we go throughout the novel? Okay? That's what a conch looks like if you guys haven't seen those.
I saw SpongeBob. So
Okay.
I already knew.
My parents used to have one when the dogs would run away, and they would like come back and you'd blow the conch. I don't know. It was weird. Okay.
Wait, I thought you would like, ask questions to it, and then it would give you like answers.
You could like hear the ocean.
Yeah, you could. That's what you do. You listen.
Well, he's not SpongeBob, but you talk to it.
Well, SpongeBob's not real, mate. Come on.
You actually hear
I thought you blow through it and it makes
Huh?
a lot of noise.
You actually hear the ocean.
It's like the
I
sound.
feel like I've tried it, but
It's the
it's
sound moving through.
All right. Piggy's specs. Remember when you guys were doing your pre-reading? Why did you keep the person with the specs?
What?
To build. When you do the pre-reading activity, did you do the pre-reading activity
I think.
where you had to kill people?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Did you keep the
yeah.
person with the glasses?
Yes.
I don't remember.
Okay. So they're saying they kept the person with the glasses because they could light a fire with it.
Oh, that's so smart.
the
Okay.
problem is I have
Plus,
glasses,
you
so I
always
should have
like
kept it.
Just rub
Yeah.
two sticks together.
Okay. So
Very
symbolically, what could Piggy's specs represent? Safety, maybe.
Burning
Okay.
a pig.
Okay. Okay. And just so you know, specs are a pair of glasses. That's all it is. It's just old English terms for pair of glasses. Okay. So this is also a symbol. The specs. All right. The glasses. What are they representing throughout the novel? Okay. That means they're bigger than just a pair of glasses. The author wants you to think about what it can mean to this group of boys.
Wait, so are there like no girls in the story?
No.
Oh.
And we'll get to that. It's really important. Okay. We'll get to it at the end. All right, the beastie. You guys were not introduced to this in chapter 1. As we got to chapter 3 is when it's introduced, there is a beastie on the island, and it's a huge, huge symbol. Okay? But we don't know what it is yet, so we'll get to that one. All right, the scar. So this is where the plane slams into the island. So if you can imagine, the plane hit the island, right, and then leaves a giant skid mark. So they refer to that as the scar. So imagine like a scar on your leg or something that's kind of like curved, right?
That's what I thought would happen.
Yeah.
I thought the pilot had a scar like on his face or something.
Mm-mm. So the plane disappears shortly afterward. Note the pattern of how the plane disappears and other things that disappear in the same manner. Okay? So think about it like on an island. If something like goes into the ocean, it's not going to like continue to come back shore. It's going to get dragged out to sea, right? So their plane no longer is visible. It's been like eaten alive by the ocean, basically. So the pilot, the only adult that was on with them on the island, okay, all the bodies that were in the plane. So the scar is just what they refer to as like the line, basically, where the plane hit the island and went back off. So imagine like an island, and then imagine just like a little skid mark. Okay. Like if you drove through mud, kind of, and you create like the tire marks, but really big like a plane. Okay. So, does that clear up some of the confusion that we had about chapter 1?
Yeah.
Okay. So, in chapter 2, we start to get to know the boys better. So, chapter 2, perfect. Okay. Chapter 2 is on page 32 in this book. So, go ahead and turn to page 32. So if we ever don't finish in time, like if we have like a couple pages left to read in class, or you're at home and you have a chapter to read, you can Google Lord of the Flies chapter whatever audiobook, and there's YouTube videos of people reading it, so you can just follow along. Okay, if that's easier for you.
Sometimes I like the first one.
Lord of the Flies.
It left out part of it.
Yeah, I left out like the last like skip the page.
Oh. 32. So make sure you get your book out, okay? I suggest having your characterization charts and your vocabulary charts out to fill as you read. Okay? Alright.
Flies. Chapter 2. Fire on the Mountain. By the time Ralph finished blowing the conch, the platform was crowded. There were differences between this meeting and the one held in the morning. The afternoon sun slanted in from the other side of the platform, and most
This is really fast.
of the children
Want me to just read it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll post it online if we don't finish it. By the time Ralph finished blowing the conch, the platform was crowded. There were differences between this meeting and the one held in the morning. The afternoon sun slanted in from the other side of the platform, and most of the children, feeling too late, the smart of sunburn, had put their clothes on. The choir, noticeably less of a group, had discarded their clothes. Okay? So, it's hot, right? The boys would take off their clothes, it's real hot.
I have a question.
The afternoon sunset from the rest of the platform. I think it's just where they're sitting.
Okay.
Like it's just supposed to be like an area where they've all seated and they're referring to it as a platform. Okay, I'm gonna go back to civilization. I'm still painting this as a civilized society. Ralph sat on a fallen trunk, his left side to the sun. On his right were most of the choir. On his left, the larger boys who had not known each other before the evacuation. Before him, small children squatted in the grass. Silence now. Ralph lifted the cream and pink shell to his knees, and a sudden breeze scattered light over the platform. He was uncertain whether to stand up or remain sitting. He looked sideways to his left, toward the bathing pool. Piggy was sitting near, but giving no help. Ralph cleared his throat. Well then! All at once he found he could talk fluently and explain what he had to say. He passed a hand through his fair hair and spoke. We're on an island. We've been on the mountaintop and seen water all around. We saw no houses, no smoke, no footprints, no boats, no people. We're on an uninhabited island with no other people on it. Dude. Jack broke in. All the same, you need an army for hunting pigs. Yes, there are pigs on the island. All three of them tried to convey the sense of the pink live things struggling in the rivers. We saw squealing. It broke away before I could kill it, but next time. Jack slammed his knife into a trunk and looked around challengingly. The meeting settled down again. So you see, said Ralph, we need hunters to get us meat. And another thing. He lifted the shell on his knees and looked around the sun-splashed faces. There aren't any grown-ups. We shall have to look after ourselves. The meeting hummed and was silent. And another thing. We can't have everybody talking at once. We'll all have to have hands up like at school. So like, you know, when you raise your hand. So he's trying to keep order, right? He held the conch before his face and glanced around the mouth. Then I'll give him the conch. Conch! That's what the shell's called. I'll give the conch to the next person to speak. He can hold it when he's speaking. But look, and he won't be interrupted, except by me. Jack was on his feet. We'll have rules, he cried excitedly. Lots of rules. And when anyone breaks them, wacko, bong, doink! Ralph felt the conch lifted from his lap. And Piggy was standing, cradling the great cream shell, and the shouting died down. Jack, left on his feet, looked uncertainly at Ralph, who smiled and patted the log. Jack sat down. Piggy took off his glasses and blinked at the assembly while he wiped them on his shirt. Okay. Yeah.
So is Jack or is Ralph?
Right now, Ralph is. Is Ralph the one? He's maintaining the order, right? He has the conscious thinking. We're gonna do this. We need to raise our hands. We need to.
Oh.
Jack's
I thought Jack was saying.
Jack's the leader of like the little fire, like fires will go.
Yes. Jack is the one that's like, I'm gonna go hunting. Okay. So if you guys didn't notice, not every line has dialogue with the tag. So it doesn't say who's speaking.
Yes, it's confusing.
It's confusing who's speaking. The more that you go, the more that you'll recognize who is talking. But that's the hardest part to recognize who is speaking, okay? You'll get better at that, I promise. Alright, page 34. You're hindering Ralph. You're not letting him get to the most important thing. He paused effectively. Who knows we're here, eh? He knew at the airport. The man with the trumpet thing. My dad. Piggy put on his glasses. Nobody knows where we are, said Piggy. He was paler than before and breathless. Perhaps they knew where we were going to, and perhaps not. But they don't know where we are because we never got there. He gazed at them for a moment, then swayed and sat down. Ralph took the conch from his hands. That's what I was going to say, he went on, when you he gazed at their intent faces. The plane was shot down in flames. Nobody knows where we are. We may be here a long time. The silence was so complete that they could hear the unevenness of Piggy's breathing. The sun slanted in and lay golden over half the platform. The breezes that on the lagoon had chased their tails like kittens were finding their way across the platform and into the forest. Ralph pushed back the tangle of fair hair that hung on his forehead. So we may be here a long time. Nobody said anything, he grinned suddenly, but this is a good island. Me, Jack, Simon, and me, we climbed the mountain. It's wizard. There's food and drink and rocks, blue flowers. Piggy, partly recovered, pointed to the conch in Ralph's hands, and Jack and Simon fell silent. Ralph went on. While we're waiting, you can have a good time on this island. He gesticulated quietly. It's like in a book. At once there was a clamor. Treasure Island. Swallows and Amazons. Coral Island. See, there's the allusion to the Coral Island. Okay? Ralph waved the conch. This is our island. It's a good island. Until the grown-ups come to fetch us, we'll have fun. Jack held out his hand for the conch. There's pigs, he said, there's food, and bathing water in that little stream along there and everything. Didn't anyone find anything else? He handed the conch back to Ralph and sat down. Apparently, no one had found anything. So you have the visual right now, they're like all kind of in a circle, and they're like passing the conch along to people who want to talk. Okay? That's what's happening. The older boys first noticed the child when he resisted. There was a group of little boys urging him forward, and he did not want to go. He was a shrimp of a boy, about 6 years old, and one side of his face was blotted out by a mulberry-colored birthmark. He stood now, warped out of the perpendicular by the fierce light of publicity, and he bored into the coarse grass with one toe. He was muttering and about to cry. The other little boys, whispering but serious, pushed him toward Ralph. All right, said Ralph, come on then. The small boy looked around in panic. Speak up! The small boy held out his hands for the conch, and the assembly shouted with laughter. At once he snatched back his hands and started to cry. Let him have the conch, shouted Peggy. Let him have it. At last Ralph induced him to hold the shell, but by then the blow of laughter had taken away the child's voice. Peggy knelt by him, one hand on the great shell, listening and interpreting to the assembly. He wants to know what you're going to do about the snake thing. Ralph laughed, and the other boys laughed with him. The small boy twisted further into himself. Tell us about the snake thing. Now he says it was a beastie. Beastie, a snake thing ever so big. He saw it.
Oh, so the beast is a big snake.
Where? In the woods. Either the wandering breezes or perhaps the decline of the sun allowed a little coolness to lie under the trees. The boys felt it and stirred restlessly. You couldn't have a beastie, a snake thing on an island this size, Ralph explained kindly. You only get them in big countries like Africa or India. Murmur, and the grave nodding of heads. So murmurs mean like all the boys were like talking, okay, and then they were all like nodding their heads, like because they don't want there to be a beast on the island, right? They're like, no, he's right, only in Africa. He says the beastie came in the dark. Then he couldn't see it. Laughter and cheers. Did you hear that? Says he saw the thing in the dark. He still says he saw the beastie. It came and went away, again it came and wanted to eat him. He was dreaming. Laughing, Ralph looked for confirmation around the ring of faces. The older boys agreed, but here and there among the little ones was the doubt that required more than rational assurance. He must have had a nightmare stumbling about among all those creepers. More grave nodding. They knew about nightmares. What do you think he means when he says they knew about nightmares? Think about where they came from. What's going on in their home? Okay. So they knew about nightmares? They had seen some stuff. He says he saw the beastie, the snake thing, and will it come back tonight? But there isn't a beastie. He says in the morning it turned into them things like ropes in the trees and hung in the branches. He says, will it come back tonight? Oh wait, did I just reread that? Oh no, twice. Okay. But there isn't a beastie. There was no laughter at all now, and more grave watching. Ralph pushed both hands through his hair and looked at the little boy in mixed amusement and exasperation. Jack seized the conch. Ralph's right, of course. There isn't a snake thing. But if there was a snake, we'd hunt it and kill it. We're going to hunt pigs to get meat for everybody. We'll look for the snake, too. But there isn't a snake. We'll make sure when we go hunting. Ralph was annoyed and for the moment defeated. He felt himself facing something ungraspable. The eyes that looked so intently at him were without humor. But there isn't a beast. Something he had not known was there rose in him and compelled him to make the point loudly and again. But I tell you, there isn't a beast. The assembly was silent. Ralph looked at the conch again, and his good humor came back as he thought of what he had to say next. Now we come to the most important thing I've been thinking. I was thinking while we were climbing the mountain. He flashed a conspiratorial grin at the other two. And on the beach just now. This is what I thought. We want to have fun, and we want to be rescued. The passionate noise of agreement from the assembly hit him like a wave, and he lost his thread. He thought again. We want to be rescued, and of course, we shall be rescued. Voices babbled. The simple statement, unbacked by any proof but the weight of Ralph's new authority, brought light and happiness. He had to wave the conch before he could make them hear him. My father's in the Navy, he said. There aren't any unknown islands left. He says the Queen has a big room full of maps, and all the islands in the world are drawn here. So the Queen's got a picture of this island. Again came the sounds of cheerfulness and better heart. And sooner or later, a ship will put in here. It might even be Daddy's ship. So you see, sooner or later, we shall be rescued. He paused with point made. The assembly was lifted towards safety by his words. They liked and now respected him. Spontaneously, they began to clap, and presently the platform was loud with applause. Ralph flushed, looking sideways at Piggy's open admiration, and then the other way at Jack, who was smirking and showing that he too knew how to clap. Turn the page. Ralph waved the conch. Shut up! Wait! Listen! He went on in a silence born on his triumph. There's another thing. We can help them to find us. If a ship comes near the island, they may not notice us. So we must make smoke on top of the mountain. We must make a fire. A fire? Make a fire? At once, half the boys were on their feet. Jack clambered along them, the conch forgotten. Come on, follow me! The space under the palm trees was full of noise and movement. Ralph was on his feet too, shouting for quiet, but no one heard him. All at once, the crowd swayed toward the island and was gone, following Jack. Even the tiny children went and did their best among the leaves and broken branches. Ralph was left holding the conch with no one but Piggy. Piggy's breathing was quite restored. Like kids, he said scornfully, acting like a crowd of kids. Okay. I'm going to read that line again. Like kids, he said scornfully, acting like a crowd of kids. What's ironic about that? Aren't they like six? They're a bunch of kids, right? Okay. So, think of the scene that led up to that. What made him say that? All of a sudden, they're talking about what they're going to do with the island, and they're being civil. They're passing around the conch, and then Jack's like, fire! And then everyone leaves and goes up the mountain to do the fire. And then Ralph is left with the conch with Piggy. Okay? So, when things were all in order, they were acting like what? Civilized adults. Okay? And now Jack has been like, fire! And then they're all going up the mountain. Okay? So, do you already see who is kind of symbolic of civilization and who is symbolic of savagery? Okay. Already getting there. Ralph looked at him doubtfully and laid the conch on the tree trunk. I bet it's gone tea time, said Piggy. What do they think they're going to do on that mountain? He caressed the shell respectfully, then stopped and looked at it. Ralph, hey, where are you going? Ralph was already clambering over the first smashed swathes of the scar. A long way ahead of him was crashing in laughter. Piggy watched him in disgust, like a crowd of kids. He sighed, bent, and laced up his shoes. The noise of the errant assembly faded up the mountain. Then, with the martyred expression of a parent who has to keep up with the senseless ambulance of the children, he picked up the conch, turned toward the forest, and began to pick his way over the tumbled scar. Janessa?
We're supposed to find the definition of one of the words.
Which one?
Ambulance.
Okay. Ambulance. So, let's look it up.
Oh, I already did it.
What is it?
It's the quality of being cheerful and full of energy.
Okay, so the quality of being truthful and full of energy. So it says, then with the martyred expression of a parent who has to keep up with the senseless ebullience of the children. So they're just like, happy as can be, right? We're on an island, and there's no adults! Okay, that's where they are right now. And Piggy seems to be the only one who's kind of like...
He's gonna be realistic.
Yeah.
He
Okay.
seems the only sensible one in
Okay.
the group.
Okay. So make sure you go cut sheets out.
Wait, truthful and what?
The quality of being truthful. Nate, what was it?
The quality of being cheerful and full of energy.
Full of energy. Little kids. Little kids.
Also for Coister, like when I looked it up, it said it could be the trouble, like a person that sings trouble or the leader.
Okay.
What if he's both?
I think that's what it's supposed to be. The word choice was very important.
I put them like a member and like require like the leader of it.
Okay. Both are accurate. He is the leader and foreshadowing, right? Okay. Can we go on? So do you guys see those little stars at the bottom of the page?
Yeah.
So that's how the author is symbolizing like a break. Okay, so that scene is being left behind and we're moving to a new scene. Below the other side of the mountaintop was a platform of forest. So Janessa, and when it's saying a platform, it's saying like a single level like of forest. Okay. Once more, Ralph found himself making the cupping gesture. Down there, we could get as much wood as we want. Jack nodded and pulled at his underlip. Starting perhaps 100 feet below them on the steeper side of the mountain, the patch might have been designed expressly for fuel. Trees, forced by the damp heat, found too little soil for full growth. Fell early and decayed, creepers cradled them, and new saplings searched a way up. Jack turned to the choir, who stood ready. Their black caps of maintenance were slid over one ear like berets. We'll build a pile. Come on. They found the likeliest path down and began tugging at the dead wood. And the small boys who had reached the top came sliding too till everyone but Piggy was busy. Most of the wood was so rotten that when they pulled, it broke up into a shower of fragments and wood lice and decay. But some trunks came out in one piece. The twins, Sam and Eric, were the first to get a likely log that they could do nothing till Ralph, Jack, Simon, Roger, and Maurice found room for a handhold. Then they inched the grotesque dead thing up the rock and toppled it over on top. Each party of boys added a quota, less or more, and the pile grew. At the return, Ralph found himself alone on a limb with Jack, and they grinned at each other, sharing this burden. Once more, amid the breeze, the shouting, the slanting sunlight on the high mountain was shed that glamour, that strange invisible light of friendship, adventure, and content. So right now they're building a fire, right? They just got a bunch of wood. Almost too heavy. Jack grinned back, not for the two of us. Okay, so Jack and Ralph are BFFs right now. Okay? They're in the BFF friend zone. Yes.
Isn't Ralph showing the civilized leadership type of, Jack is showing the savagery type thing?
So far, we've seen examples of that.
I feel like that might be a point.
Okay. So keep that in mind as you go.
I thought Jack and Maurice were the same person.
No. Maurice is like a character, but he's not a big character. He's just kind of mentioned throughout.
Okay.
The big four are Jack, Ralph, Simon, and Piggy. Roger's big too. Okay. Together, joined in an effort by the burden, they staggered up the last steep of the mountain. Together, they chanted 1, 2, 3, and crashed the log onto the great pile. Then they stepped back, laughing with triumphant pleasure, so that immediately Ralph had to stand on his head. Below them, boys were still laboring, though some of the small ones had lost interest and were searching the safe forest for fruit. Now the twins, with unsuspected intelligence, came up the mountain with armfuls of dried leaves and dumped them against the pile. One by one, as they sensed that the pile was complete, the boys stopped going back for more and stood with the peak shattered top of the mountain around them. Breath came evenly by now, and sweat dried. Ralph and Jack looked at each other while society paused about them. The shameful knowledge grew in them, and they did not know how to begin confession. Ralph spoke first, crimson in the face. Remember how hot it is? Super hot, okay? Will you? He cleared his throat and went on. Will you light the fire? Now the absurd situation was over. Jack blushed and he began to mutter vaguely. You rub 2 sticks. He glanced at Ralph and blurted out the last confession of incompetence. Has anyone got any matches? So they have no freaking clue how to light a fire. Okay, they're like, you rub some sticks together and fire. Okay? You make a bow and spin the arrow, said Roger. He rubbed his hands in mine. So he's like pretending to rub sticks together. A little air was moving over the mountain. Piggy came with it in shorts and shirt, laboring cautiously out of the forest with the evening sunlight gleaming from his glasses. He held the conch under his arm. Piggy, have you got any matches? The other boys took up the cry till the mountain rang. Piggy shook his head and came to the pile. Ma, you've made a big heap, haven't you? Jack pointed suddenly. His specs, used them as burning glasses. Piggy was surrounded before he could back away. Here, let me go! His voice rose to a shriek of terror as Jack snatched the glasses off his face. Mind out! Give it back! I can hardly see! You'll break the conch! Ralph elbowed him to one side and knelt by the pile, stand out of the light. There was pushing and pulling and officious cries. Ralph moved the lenses back and forth, this way and that, till a glossy white image of the declining sun lay on a piece of rotten wood. Almost at once a thin trickle of smoke rose up and made him cough. Jack knelt too and blew gently, so that the smoke drifted away, thickening and a tiny flame appeared. The flame, merely visible at first in that bright sunlight, enveloped a small twig, grew, was enriched with color, and reached up to a branch which exploded with a sharp crack. The flame flapped higher, and the boys broke into a cheer. So that described how the glasses worked, right? You got a really small fire, and now it's glowing. The boys are like, yeah, fire! My specs, howled Piggy! Give me my specs! Ralph stood away from the pile and put the glasses into Piggy's groping hands. His voice subsided to a mutter. Just blurs, that's all. Hardly see my hand. The boys were dancing. The pile was so rotten and now so tinder dry that whole limbs yielded passionately to the yellow flames that poured upwards and shook a great beard of flame 20 feet in the air. For yards were in the fire, the heat was like a blow, and the breeze was a river of sparks. Trunks crumbled to white dust. Ralph shouted, More wood! All of you get more wood! Life became a race with the fire, and the boys scattered through the upper forest. To keep a clean flag of flame flying on the mountain was the immediate end, and no one looked further. Even the smallest boys, unless fruit claimed them, brought little pieces of wood and threw them in. The air moved a little faster and became a light wind, so that leeward and windward side were clearly differentiated. On one side the air was cool, but on the other the fire thrust out a savage arm of heat that crinkled hair on the instant. Boys who felt the evening wind on their damp faces paused to enjoy the freshness of it, and then found they were exhausted. They flung themselves down in the shadows that lay among the shattered rocks. The beard of flame diminished quickly. Then the pile fell inwards with a soft, cindery sound and sent a great tree of sparks upwards that leaned away and drifted downward. The boys lay panting like dogs. Ralph raised his head off his forearms. That was no good, Roger spat efficiently into the hot dust. What do you mean? There wasn't any smoke, only flame. Piggy had settled himself in a space between two rocks and sat with the conch on his knees. We haven't made a fire, he said. What's any use? We couldn't keep a fire like that going now if we tried. A fat lot you tried, said Jack contemptuously. You just sat. We used his specs, said Simon, smearing a black cheek with his forearm. He helps that way. Okay, have we heard much about Simon at all? Okay, so what's kind of that first, what do we know about him so far, just from that one scene? He's friendly, he's defending Piggy, okay. So he's kind, we know that. I got the conch, said Piggy indignantly. You let me speak. The conch doesn't count on top of the mountain, said Jack, so you shut up. I got the conch in my hand. Put on green branches, said Maurice. That's the best way to make smoke. I got the conch. Jack turned fiercely. You shut up. Piggy wilted. Ralph took the conch from him and looked round the circle of boys. We've got to have special people for looking after the fire. Any day there may be a ship out there. He waved his arm at the taut wire of the horizon. And if we have a signal going, they'll come and take us off. And another thing, we ought to have more rules. Where the conches, that's a meaning. The same up here as down there. They assented. Piggy opened his mouth to speak, caught Jack's eye, and shut it again. Jack held out his hands for the conch and stood up, holding the delicate thing carefully in his sooty hands. I agree with Ralph. We've got to have rules and obey them. After all, we're not savages. We're English, and the English are best at everything. So we've got to do the right things. He turned to Ralph. Ralph, I'll split up the choir. I'll split up the choir, my hunters, that is, into groups, and we'll be responsible for keeping the fire going. This generosity brought a spatter of applause from the boys, so that Jack grinned at them, then waved the conch for silence. We'll let the fire burn up now. Who could see smoke at nighttime anyway? And we can start the fire again whenever we like. Altos, you can keep the fire going this week, and Trebles the next. So, that's like music levels, okay? And we'll be responsible for keeping a lookout, too. If we see a ship out there, they follow the direction of his bony arm with their eyes. We'll put green branches on, then there'll be more smoke. They gazed intently at the dense blue of the horizon, as if a little silhouette might appear there at any moment. The sun in the west was a drop of burning gold that slid nearer and nearer the sill of the world. All at once they were aware of the evening as the end of light and warmth. Roger took the conch and looked round at them gloomingly. I've been watching the sea. There hasn't been the trace of a ship. Perhaps we'll never be rescued. A murmur rose and swept away. Ralph took back the conch. I said before we'll be rescued sometime. We've just got to wait, that's all. Daring, indignant, Piggy took the conch. That's what I said. I said about our meetings and things, and then you said, shut up. His voice lifted into the whine of virtuous recrimination. They stirred and began to shout him down. You said you wanted a small fire, and you've been and built a pile like a hayrick. If I say anything, cried Piggy with bitter realism, you say shut up. But if Jack or Maurice or Simon, he paused in the tumult, standing, looking beyond them, and down the unfriendly side of the mountain to the great patch where they had found dead wood. Then he laughed, so strangely that they were hushed. Looking at the flash of his spectacles in astonishment, they followed his gaze to find the sour joke. Yes, ma'am.
Back on page 43, which was to the definitions of two other words.
What are the words?
Recrimination.
Okay, recrimination.
And
Tumultuous.
tumultuous.
Oh, I think it's tumult, though.
Tumult. Yeah.
So recrimination is an accusation in response to one from somewhere else. And then tumult, or how do you say that, is a loud, confused noise, especially when caused by a large mass.
So tumultuous is like, that's a word you would be familiar with. It's like when you're like at sea and like it's like tumultuous, like it's just kind of like rough and rowdy. That's like when it's tumult, it's like chaos almost. So recrimination is an accusation, right? In response.
Yeah.
ACCUSATION.
So if we don't finish the chapter, do you have to read the rest at home?
Yeah, we only have
4 pages.
1 page. So 5 minutes. I think we'll be good. Okay. You got your small fire, all right. Smoke was rising here and there among the creepers that festooned the dead or dying trees. As they watched, a flash of fire appeared at the root of one wisp, and then the smoke thickened. Small flames stirred the trunk of a tree and crawled away through leaves and brushwood, dividing and increasing. One patch touched a tree trunk and scrambled up like a bright squirrel. The smoke increased, sifted, rolled outwards. The squirrel leapt on the wings of the wind and clung to another standing tree, eating downward. Beneath the dark canopy of leaves and smoke, the fire laid hold on the forest and began to gnaw. Acres of black and yellow smoke rolled steadily toward the sea. At the sight of the flames and the irresistible course of the fire, the boys broke into shrill, excited cheering. The flames, as though they were a kind of wildlife, crept as a jaguar creeps on its belly toward a line of birch-like saplings that fledged an outcrop of the pink rock. They flapped at the first of the trees, and the branches grew a green foliage of fire. The heart of flame leapt nimbly across the gap between the trees, and then went swinging and flaring along the whole row of them. Beneath the capering boys, a quarter of a mile square forest was savage with smoke and flame. The separate noises of the fire merged into a drum roll that seemed to shake the mountain. You got your small fire, all right. Startled, Ralph realized that the boys were falling still and silent, feeling the beginnings of awe at the power set free below them. The knowledge and the awe made him savage. "Oh, shut up! I got the conch," said Piggy. "I got a right to speak." They looked at him with eyes that lacked interest in what they saw and cocked ears to the drum roll of the fire. Piggy glanced nervously into hell and cradled the conch. We got to let that burn now, and that was our firewood." He licked his lips. "There ain't nothing we can do. We ought to be more careful. I'm scared." Jack dragged his eyes away from the fire. "You're always scared, yeah, fatty." "I got the conch," said Piggy bleakly. He turned to Ralph. "I got the conch, ain't I, Ralph?" Unwillingly, Ralph turned away from the splendid, awful sight. "What's that?" "The conch. I got a right to speak." The twins giggled together. "We wanted smoke. Now look." A pall stretched for miles away from the island. All the boys except Piggy started to giggle. Presently, they were shrieking with laughter. Piggy lost his temper. "I got the conch, just you listen. The first thing we ought to have made was shelters down there by the beach. It wasn't half cold down there in the night, but the first time Ralph says fire, you goes howling and screaming up this here mountain, like a pack of kids." By now they were listening to the tirade. "How can you expect to be rescued if you don't put first things first and act proper?" He took off his glasses and made as if to put down the conch, but the sudden motion toward it, most of the older boys changed his mind. He tucked the shell under his arm and crouched back on a rock. "Then when you get here, you build a bonfire that isn't no use. Now you bend and set the whole island on fire." Did you guys get that? When they were talking about the flames jumping from tree to tree, so now there's fire. Okay? "Won't we look funny if the whole island burns up? Cooked fruit, that's what we'll have to eat, and roast pork, and that's nothing to laugh at. You said Ralph was cheap and you don't give him time to think. Then when he says something, you brush off like, he paused and the fire growled." Yeah.
We're supposed to do the definition of tyrant.
Okay. Let's finish this and then you guys can go back and do that definition later. Okay? "And that's not all. Them kids, the little uns. You took any notice of them? Who knows how many we got?" Ralph took a sudden step forward. "I told you to. I told you to get a list of names." "How could I?" cried Piggy indignantly. "All by myself. They waited for 2 minutes and they fell in the sea. They went into the forest and just scattered everywhere. How was I to know which was which?" Ralph licked pale lips. "Then you don't know how many of us there ought to be. How could I with them little ones running around like insects? Then when you three came back, as soon as you said make a fire, they all ran away and never had a chance." "That's enough," said Ralph sharply and snatched back the conch. "If you didn't, you didn't. Then you'd come up here and pinch my specs." Jack turned on him. "You shut up. And them little uns was wandering about down there where the fire is. How do you know they aren't still there?" Piggy stood up and pointed to the smoke and flames. A murmur rose among the boys and died away. Something strange was happening to Piggy, for he was gasping for breath. "That little un," gasped Piggy. "Him with the mark on his face." Remember the mulberry birthmark on his face? "Where is he now?" The crowd was silent as death. "Him that talks about the snakes, he was down there." A tree exploded in the fire like a bomb. Tall swathes of creepers rose for a moment into view, agonized, and went down again. The little boy screamed at them. Snakes! Snakes! Look at the snakes! In the west and unheated, the sun lay only an inch or two above the sea. Their faces were lit redly from beneath. Piggy fell against a rock and clutched it with both his hands. That little one that had the mark on his face, where is he now? I tell you, I don't see him. The boys looked at each other fearfully, unbelieving. Where is he now? Ralph muttered the reply as if in shame. Perhaps he went back to the beneath him on the unfriendly side of the mountain, which Drumroll continued. What happened to Piggy? So remember, they can't find the 6-year-old kid that had brought up the beastie.
I think he got dragged away by something.
Okay, or they lit a fire, not thinking about the consequences, right? Did you guys notice how Piggy is like trying to make be smart, and he's like, "Did you do this?" And he's like grabbing the conch at the same time, like he's trying to hold the conch all of his life. Okay, that's important. Remember, follow the conch. Okay, so you guys have homework. It's all on modules. You need to annotate that Bible verse. Okay, and think about the comparisons to the island. All right. Is that easier if I'm reading it and kind of go through?
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember,
so the plane, there was, it's
you get a lot of trouble.
okay?
Yeah, what?
The long angry speech.
A long anger speech?
A tirade?
Yeah.
This one's kind of like.
So it's the thing you need to annotate is that in our book, like,
It's in your packet.
It's the allegory worksheet due tomorrow or Wednesday.
What's it? I'm going to say 5.
yeah, it is.
What? You guys can go. Sorry, I don't know if I made that clear.
Character chart. Do you have what's he like? He's just said like quotes and like explain it. Yeah. Actually say like.
Yeah, I want you to know like your opinion.
Oh, I'm just in the sleep.
Yeah.
You're so good.
Oh.